We love Zencaster because it allows us to record the audio for our podcast and create the video segments we use for our weekly Sister Scoop episodes. Zencaster has helped us make content capture simple.
It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests, and feel a sense of zen knowing Zencaster's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable.
If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencaster's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast in one place and distribute it to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations.
Just go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code SistersAssembled, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.
Katie and I are always hungry, and one snack we both love is beef jerky. That's why we're so excited to tell you about one of our favorite jerky brands, Matt Hat Jerky.
Matt Hat's delicious taste makes it a great snack, and the variety of flavors, including original, black truffle, and my personal favorite, roasted garlic, means there's a flavor for everyone. Plus, it's local to the area where we grew up in, which we just love.
Use the link in the show notes below to get some Matt Hat Jerky for yourself, and make sure to use our coupon code SistersAssembled for 10% off. Hello and welcome to Sisters Assembled, your home for our takes on all things MCU, which, as you know, and as you've been following us for the last few weeks, with the exception of a little bit of Venom coverage, means that we are still focusing on Agatha All Along. And specifically, this week, we're going to talk about episodes 8 and 9, the finale week of the show, which was quite a doozy, quite a lot of content, quite a lot happened. Because we've got a lot to talk about, I'm going to stop talking and let Katie kick it off because there is a lot to dive into.
Yeah, and actually I think we might have some, not disagreements, but I don't know if we feel exactly the same about the ending. I'll be honest, I enjoyed it, but I don't think it was perfect. And by perfect, I mean, I know nothing's a 10 out of 10, so like a 9 out of 10. And I do think, in comparison to plenty of other endings, it knocks a bunch of them out of the park. And there were a lot of things I enjoyed, a lot of things I really, really liked. There were things that I kind of didn't like. And we'll get into those as well. And honestly, the things I didn't like are more of a overarching part of the story, more than they were of the actual ending itself. But yeah, I mean, I think this was a solid show. I won't lie about that. I think the storytelling still was amazing. I think it had me shocked. And even then, there were things we all predicted, right? Episode 7, we saw that Rhea was death. We all said that. A lot, or I shouldn't say all of us, but a lot of us were saying that from very early on. We were talking about the possibility of her being death. I think even down to, we see that Billy built the road. We'll get into that. Did we not just talk about the possibility of Billy building the road? We did. I know we threw out another theory as well, dealing with Rhea, which in its own way kind of came true.
Yeah, a little twisty, but like not totally off.
Like we were kind of in the ballpark with that. It wasn't her directly, but like in the realm of it. So yeah. And so it is kind of interesting because while it did seem like there were a lot of things we were throwing out there, similar to WandaVision, they came true. And I don't think a lot of us expected that.
Yeah, I mean, with the whole Billy thing, like seeing that was all everybody was talking about last week. And I feel like that was all over my For You page. That was like the prevailing theory. So to watch that actually come to life in real time and like watch that on my screen was actually pretty cool. I was like, as a fandom, we kind of nailed that one, right? And like that doesn't always happen, and that's not always fun. Like sometimes it is kind of sucky when you're like, I called that because it's predictable. In this case, I don't think it's because it was predictable. I think it's because the show led us there. Like it set it up in that way. It was giving the right clues. A lot of people were talking about, you know, Agatha's comments and the, you're so much like your mother. You're such a Maximoff. Basically all the things that were going through Billy's head were the things that I was seeing as people giving evidence. So I actually loved that came true. In terms of my overall reactions, I think this is the best show, overarching, overall, complete, that they have put out, period, the end. And I'm talking like fully MCU, not any of the Netflix shows, because I know people will come at me for that statement and talk about some of the seasons of Daredevil. I get it. I'm talking like not any of the Netflix stuff, none of the Hulu stuff, none of the stuff they were putting on. I think they were doing shows on ABC. I know. Oh, yeah. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on ABC. We're not talking about those. I'm talking 2021 and on. This is the best show that they have produced. It has had the most consistently good episodes. Even the filler episode was good. And I think that what we have found, and you can go back to the recordings, is that even in shows that overall we liked, there was always an episode that we were like, this is not good. Or it's boring to start, right? It's too slow, but it ends really well. Or the opposite. Hey, we are vibing through 5 episodes. I'm looking at you, Loki season 2. We are vibing through 5 episodes, and episode 6 we are not vibing with, which I know is a very unpopular opinion, because episode 6 of Loki season 2 is actually the highest rated episode of Marvel TV to this day. Why we didn't like it, listen to our episode, but we are very much in the minority on that one. But I will say, I texted Katie right after. I said they finally did it. They finally went 9 for 9. And I'm not saying all 9 were perfect, but they finally did 9 for 9 good episodes of television. This is the first time that they've actually been able to, in my opinion, successfully do a show where I was like, I enjoyed every single episode of this. Did some stand out more than others? Absolutely. But overall, I liked the ending. I liked what it set up. I'm excited to talk about that. And I'm excited with what happened with the characters, and especially the suit up. We'll get to it, but oh my gosh, I screamed. I apologize to my neighbors because I was very loud.
Yeah, I think I struggle just a little bit with 8 and 9, but I don't disagree with your sentiment on it still went 9 for 9 as far as I'm concerned. I just think 8 and 9 were actually told like backwards a little bit to me, with the flashback being in 9, but we just had like almost an entire conclusion in 8. I think that's where I struggled. That's not the only struggle. I'll get into my bigger things as well, but I think that was like the basis of it, putting that flashback of Agatha's story in the very end, just kind of, and I see where things fell and why certain things were in 8, why certain things were in 9. I understand that. But I think that the order just threw it off. But I do agree. I think as a whole, it is probably the best show to point to say, yeah, no, it actually was able to, from start to finish itself, and it told a cohesive story, and it was well done. I think the only other show that semi even comes close would actually be its predecessor, WandaVision. Because I think even though you don't know what's, and I'll say, I understand if you go back, I love WandaVision, but the first 2 episodes are a hard watch now. In my
Oof,
opinion,
yeah.
they're just slow.
Yeah.
Like, they're hard to get back into the show. But when we were watching it for the very first time, remember that feeling and remember being like, what does this all mean? What do we do? Like, we were all like, can't wait for next week. So I don't think just because, and also I've seen it like 4 times. So I think that doesn't help that I'm like, I've seen this part. Let's move along to the rest of the story where things start getting really, really weird. So I think for the most part, that one also did really well. Even the ending, I mean, I know our famous words, which you guys didn't get to hear because we didn't have a podcast, but our dad still quotes us, was that we were like, it was anticlimactic.
No, it was underwhelming.
Oh,
Underwhelming is the quote. You got the quote wrong.
you know why? You know why? Because there was something else we were kept calling anticlimactic, and I can't remember what it was. There was another piece that we were like, it was anticlimactic, and I can't remember what it was.
You're right.
But it was our word for that.
We didn't want to use underwhelmed again because it was so tied to
It
the
was so
WandaVision
iconic
finale.
to WandaVision. Yes, that we were like, no, anticlimactic is this one's. Sorry, underwhelming. And that we literally watched it, just stared at the TV, kind of looked at each other, and we both were like, no, that's like underwhelming.
Yeah.
Like that was it.
Yeah.
But it was still in itself pretty good. I'll say that.
I would also argue the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I think, is like, if we're gonna go top 3, I think it's Agatha. Then I think WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier are interchangeable. I know we struggled, I think, with the first episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier because I think it was backwards to some of the other ones because we really liked the ending.
Yeah.
We really, really liked the ending of that one. But I think we struggled with the beginning.
I don't fully remember, and I have to be honest, as a Bucky stan, it's going to sound horrible. I've actually not rewatched The Falcon and Winter Soldier once, mainly because he also has been like MIA in the Marvel universe. So has Sam up until like obviously Cat 4 is coming out. So I had a reason to rewatch WandaVision because of like MOM and stuff. and then, like, Agatha and all that stuff. I didn't rewatch it in full, but I watched some of the episodes. So, like, I had a reason for people who were coming back, but I didn't necessarily like, I haven't yet had the reason to rewatch The Falcon and Winter Soldier. I would also argue they did very well with theirs that I remember. Either way, let's get into some of these topics before we waste all our time just ranking shows, which we will do. I want to start with the big reveal, actually, because I think that's the biggest part of this. The road's not real until Billy made it real.
Yeah. Which, I mean, like we said kind of at the top, I think that's been the prevailing theory since last week. I think what was interesting to me was twofold. One, I loved the way that it proved without a shadow of a doubt who his mama was, because strong emotions and suddenly there's a whole new reality for everyone. So I really did love how it kind of ties him even more to the mother that he denies, the mother that he refuses to acknowledge. And I think that's interesting because I think it's going to make it harder for him now that he's able to put some of Agatha's comments into context and be like, oh, that woman who did, I mean, not that he remembers the hex because that was still when William was alive, but like that woman who did that, that is my mom. And I can tell you why, because I just created an entire road. And I think the other interesting thing then about this reveal is what it means for Billy and the guilt that he's going to carry, because he's a genuinely good person. And I think that is what has come out of this show. Like, he never wanted to hurt anyone. And the raw agony on his face, I mean, go Joe Locke. The agony that he showed when he realized that he was the reason that Lilia is dead and Alice is dead and all of those things, that is something that he's going to carry as a character, and I'm excited to kind of see how that plays out. I also actually loved the mentorship and emotional support that Agatha very rarely showed. You know, it's not often that she kind of provides that to someone, but the way that she was able to reframe it and say, yes, you killed those people, which to her isn't really a big deal, but you know, whatever. Yes, you killed those people, but you also saved Jen. So like it wasn't all bad. And I think that's, you know, something that he can kind of use as like a counterweight to what he's done. But I think those are the two elements that kind of stuck out to me the most, was that undeniable identification with his mother, or parallel to his mother is probably the better word, and then also how that realization is going to shape him as we move on to him, you know, trying to find Tommy.
I like a lot of the points you made there. And I think there's things to say about all of them, and I'm definitely not going to be able to hit them all. But I think it's so interesting because I like the reveal of it. You see how he's going throughout his room because you're with him in that moment. And he's like, so weird. I have a poster of Lorna Wu. And then he's like, even weirder. I have these little Oz figurines. And then the leaves, you saw once he saw the leaves, he was like, ooh, wait a second. This is looking
And
a
the
little
painting with the
suspicious.
house.
Well, and that's something I really wanted to point out because we talk about episode 7 and all of Lilia's pieces of her power and these little clips she gets, right? Her gaps. And how even down to the first episode when she's like, "Get off me," when they're singing the Witch's Road song, they're singing the whole ballad, and everybody's like, "This girl's a little." And then we see it play out, right? Like we understand where the gaps come in. That was almost how I felt with even like Agatha's little pieces she'd say to him on the road. And now there were people who were pointing out, hey, you know, when she says it's just like how you thought of it or something like that, that first line. And then she says something else and you talked about the mother line and, oh, I know you're a Maximoff. None of this would be nearly as dramatic. These are all lines that we all were like, yeah, this could support the theory, but we also could have wrote them off too. Like it didn't have to be anything at all. It could have
They were
just been
very subtle.
yes. But then there were the ones that were like deep level subtle. Like even the one about the house, I thought she was talking to Jen because it was Jen's trial. And obviously, when we're first introduced to Jen, we see how she is with her whole skincare line and all that. I genuinely thought she was saying, like, it fits you. Like, this is your little vision board. Like, this makes sense to me. I know like no part of me thought, yeah, of course she's talking to Billy. Like I wouldn't have thought about that. Or when she even talks about Wanda's tell. And I was deciphering that forever. Even like I'd be getting ready to go to bed and I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, but what was Wanda's tell? What was her thing that she always showed? And I couldn't think of it. But it's because of the emotion behind their magic that they create these little like fake worlds essentially. flashbacks to the different pieces when Agatha was pretty much calling him out for his BS. And none of us, I shouldn't say none of us, because there were a few, but some of the other ones that I would have never thought twice about are insane to me.
Yeah.
I loved that. I thought it was so well done. I also even down to, and we see that as part of Agatha's story and how they kind of combine, but when, her whole ploy with the witch's road, and then the next thing you know, there is a door. And he comes running down the stairs down to go down it, and she's like, "Oh, son of a nut. Like, come on, I found another one of these guys. Really?"
Yeah. And it's like, there's not actually a thing here. So what's this? And it's interesting because I think we did point out last episode when he says to her, it's like you've never been on the road before. And she just kind of looks at him. And I think that was something we talked about was like, he's like calling her out, and I don't know that I was even thinking fully like, oh, it's because like he invented the road, but we were thinking it was a ploy for her and Rio to she gets the power, Rio gets the bodies.
Which it kind of low key was.
Yeah, like I mean, I don't think I was ever truly like far enough to be like the whole thing is an illusion. Like that was something that I was starting to see online. I was like, I could get behind this, but never in a million years when we were doing last episode was I like that far along where I was like, oh yeah, like the whole thing is like Billy. Like that was just not really wasn't there yet. So that was super interesting to like see that go all the way. And then like I would love to go do a rewatch and to your point, like find out or find those little things that connect. I also loved, and this is not related to Billy and the Road, but it is like a fun Easter egg that paid off. I loved when, Lilia was giving like her final advice to folks and she was said to Agatha, when she calls you a coward, hit the deck. And then it paid off and Agatha remembered that. I loved that. And I just think this show is so cerebral and so smart in the way that it lays everything out. And it's like, if you're really paying attention, which some people totally were, like I said, like my For You page, that was the conversation last week. And people kept pointing out examples. And I loved it because for those people who are figuring it out, it is laid out clearly for you to figure it out. And I loved it. I think it's so, so smart and yet still kind of unexpected that they actually went there.
I have to give you some credit though, and I don't know if you did ever go as far as saying like it's not completely real, but episode 3 or 4 already, you were asking questions about who owns the road,
That's
who
true.
controls it.
That's true.
You were asking those, and I'll be the first to admit, I was sitting there and I was like, T, you're getting too deep right now. Like, I'm really not worried about who owns or controls the road. I'm worried about what's going on in this present moment. But I will give you that credit, and that is on a recording. Like, you guys can go back to one, I think it's 4. I think it was after the second trial. But you're sitting there and you were questioning that already. You were asking, like, who is doing all of this? There has to be somebody behind it. Now, granted, at the time, I think you were like, Mephisto, because weren't we all? Isn't that the point, right?
I'm still salty he hasn't made an appearance yet. Like, I was like, are you serious?
No,
We're going to go again?
Maybe when we go 3 for 3 with Vision Quest, we'll finally have Mephisto. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do want to you have to take some credit that you were at least asking the questions. I don't think you got there, but the questions were in fact being asked. I did enjoy it. What I liked more though was wrapping it into the fact that it never actually did exist because Agatha made it up all those years ago. And that's what I enjoyed more than anything was like, yeah, it was really cool revealing that one, he is just like his mother. They have a lot of emotions and they're like, let me just create a fake world, fun.
Very casual.
Yeah, very casual. And so I will say, that's its own thing. But then to sit there and tie it into the fact that he didn't pull the witch's road out of his butt. Let's not forget that Wanda just like out of pure and like insane amounts of power and emotion created the hex. And even when she was in it, didn't always realize she was in it. Took her till like halfway through the series when she came out and threatened Sword to like fully be like, leave me alone. This is my little town and I'm doing my own little thing. Like I'm living. But she didn't know she had built the full hex and had been doing, the mind control thing. Let's not forget, she didn't know that till the end. She didn't know she was doing what she was doing to these people. It was so interesting because for Billy, obviously this is like a little different, but he also didn't know, but he went off of lore. Like he went off of things that he's like, well, of course, the witch's road. Like Lorna Wu wrote a whole song about it. And like there's all this stuff. And even on the Wikipedia thing, Agatha is the only survivor of the Witch's Road. Like he went off of this. And yes, did he end up building that mentally? Yes. but she gave it to him. She gave him the blueprints to the road from hundreds of years ago.
Yes, I do want to point out one other parallel to his mother, though. Where do you think she got the idea for the first few episodes, the sitcoms that she watched as a child? So, again, pulling from subconscious, things that helped shape you, Billy still doesn't really remember his life in the hex. So, he's kind of like a little bit like he's a mature toddler in the sense that, like, he has the functional capacity of an adult, but like the memory of only a toddler. So the witch's road, assuming he like finds it relatively early on in his time living in William's body, that is a formative thing for him. He latches on to that probably because, he has a subconscious connection to his mother, who he still denies, but he has a subconscious connection to his mother. And that's why he's attracted to the witchiness and the magic and all of that. But that is one of the formative ideas within that, right? And so he has all of these images of witches that have subconsciously helped drive his perception of the magical world. And then when he has his little scare, I don't know if it was the Salem 7 that put him over the edge or just the idea that he's actually going to do something to go find his brother. Whatever it is that really caused that deep emotion to allow him to subconsciously channel his powers, he's also using subconscious references the same way his mother went back to her childhood and all those sitcoms when she felt safe and secure.
That's very true. And that's a great point as well. I just think it's so interesting that you have the woman who knows it's not real the whole time because she
In
is the
both
maker.
instances.
True.
Well, I think it took Agatha. No, in both
No, she
instances.
came to
Yeah.
the hex. She was not in the hex initially. She came because of Wanda. I think it's very interesting the parallels of this show, but they did it subtly enough as well that it wasn't like, oh, I would just watch the same show with a slightly different plot. Like it
Exactly.
definitely was still different enough. And maybe this is one of those cases where it's like, well, the blueprint works, but we can get different results, right? Like we can use the same structure, but do it completely differently. And it did work, I think. I also liked that knowing Agatha knew from the start, I think brings the different depth. I think that was a question we had been asking throughout the entire episode or the entire series. Like, when do we think she knew? I think she always did,
Yeah. The
is what
second.
we've been shown. Yeah, because the witch's road was never meant to be real.
Yeah.
And so it's the fact they went on it and she's like, well, this is kind of weird because, like, I've never done this because it's not supposed to be. My son and I came up with the song hundreds of years ago and I've just been using it since to get power and to kill witches because I'm angry and it was what I used to do to keep, death away from my son, and at the end of the day it didn't work. So now I'm just going to screw everybody else over, become more powerful, and here we are. I still think it was such a great kind of pickup from the two characters. I really did enjoy this. I thought it was so smart. But you did talk about the guilt.
Yeah.
And I don't want to stray away from that. I do like that Agatha tried to help ease it in the sense where she was like, yeah, but like Alice was me. Like I killed Alice. And even with Mrs. Hart, she was trying to be like, oh, well, but like she wasn't like supposed to be there. And like this was like whatever. But it doesn't change it.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting for him that he's like, I don't like this feeling. And she tries to be like, well, it gets so much easier. And it's like interesting. And I kept being asked by my boyfriend, so he's going to be evil now. Because he also kept saying, like, well, his mom. And I was like, well, you're not wrong. I can't argue that. But he was saying solely because of his story and what he did. And now you do have Agatha Harkness as a mentor. So he was like, so is he gonna go down like this darker road? And I was like, I don't think so because I think I know where he's going. But who's to say? Maybe he does. I think it's a very thin line, right? Between feeling the guilt of doing something and accepting that it had to happen or it happened how it did and just maybe doing it again. And you're like, oh, that was an accident. But now it's done. And then you do it again. You're like, well, but now it's like the more you write it off, the more you give excuses, whatever.
You desensitize yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would disagree with a part of that. I don't disagree with all of it. I do think that he's in a very fragile place in terms of he could go either way. But I do think that his morals are very strong. And I actually think he's more like his mother than you think, but not for the reasons you think. When you think about the end of WandaVision, she's horrified by what she's done to these people, right? She secludes herself. What takes her from Wanda, who never wanted to hurt people, Wanda, who locked herself in a room when she accidentally hurt people in Civil War, to the woman who goes after America and obliterates the Illuminati? What is the one difference? The Darkhold. And I think the fact that that does not exist means that Billy will keep his good heart and he will keep his genuine intentions despite the fact that Agatha Harkness is his mentor, because he sees Agatha and he looks at her with empathy, but he doesn't look at her like he wants to emulate her. She is almost like a cautionary tale, right? He wants her skills and he wants the perspective she can provide, but almost as a counterbalance, because even when she tells him, hey, I killed Alice, hey, this gets easier, his first reaction is, I don't want it to get easier. So she's almost providing that opposing viewpoint for him to be like, I could choose the easy way out, but then I'm going to end up just like you, someone who's desensitized to killing, and that's not what I want. So I actually think he'll be okay. I think it is a fragile time, but my guess is Billy Maximoff is going to come out. He's going to get through this. He's going to use this as a time where he's going to learn to control his power, because this is his motivation. Because when he doesn't control it, he just killed 3 people he cared about.
That's a good point. And like I said, I don't think I necessarily thought he was going to go down that road, but I was being asked that question.
Yeah, which is a fair question.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And I think it's fair. I think it's a good thing to ask, especially because you do see his mom supposedly end WandaVision relatively peacefully. And then boom, MOM. We have our complaints. And so does Lizzie. But regardless, I also want to talk about, and I don't know how in detail we actually need to go on 2 out of 3 of these. The first just being the epic suit up. He looked amazing. He looked amazing. I screamed.
I was hysterical.
I could not believe they just like dropped that on us though, low key. Like I was like, what? And he just like comes floating down. I was like, okay, Billy. But I enjoyed it. I loved it.
Came out of nowhere in this beautiful comic accurate costume that I literally was just like, I'm so happy to be alive right now. Like like one of the other good ones, his mother. Like truly, when she suits up for the first time, she puts on the crown, she gets the half cape, the whole 9 yards, and you're like, now that's a comic accurate suit. And then her son just rolls on up with his little floaty powers that he's just learning how to do. And he's like, look at my comic accurate suit. Like mother, like son. Like, how many more parallels are we going to draw here?
No, seriously. My other point being, I didn't expect him to be the one to find Tommy a body.
Woo! No, I thought Tommy was out there living. I was shocked.
But it made sense because, and I don't think, and I can't prove this, I don't think, unless I put it in the blog. But I do know at one point I had the thought where I was like, well, it is kind of weird because, and actually it's because my boyfriend hasn't seen WandaVision in about 9 million years. So he is asking me all these questions. And so I'm explaining things. And I do remember at one point, I don't know if it was to him or just like in my own head as I'm thinking about things, but I was thinking, well, it makes sense for Billy to have floated into another body. He is magical. And we were talking about at some point, he broke the laws, which we'll get to.
Called it.
But I talked about him breaking the laws of magic. And I was like, is it the Salem 7 after him? Is it Rio? And now I know that's in a blog post somewhere. But that was talked about. That being said, I knew he was the magical one of the 2. And I think I was kind of like, well, it does make sense for him to do what he did. He body snatched like his mother. But what about Tommy?
What is he going to do? Run super fast into a body?
Right. And so I think that's exactly what he's going to do. You know, I think I was struggling because I was like, is it like just a soul thing or is it because he's magical? Like, I think I was trying to understand that. And this proved, no, Tommy's out there floating around because he is a soul, but he cannot take a body himself. He clearly doesn't have the ability to just get the body, find it, and like go into it. So I was shocked that Billy was the one to find Tommy a body. But that makes so much sense, right? He kept saying, I can feel him, but I can't find him. Well, no crap, he's not a physical body.
Yeah, I thought that was crazy. I also, just another point in Billy's favor of being a genuinely good person. He was so horrified at the thought that he killed, I don't know how else to phrase this, that he killed Tommy's body, like that he killed the original owner of Tommy's body. And like, I literally had to go back and turn on closed captions to make sure I heard him right, where he asks her, "Did I just kill someone to give Tommy a body?" And I
Yeah,
was
he's like,
like,
"Am I killing him to give him the body?"
I know, and then Agatha's reaction afterward, like, her comment, like, broke my heart, but I was like, "Oh my god," like, it was so intense, and I was like, "This is crazy. Crazy."
Yeah, I thought that was a very nice touch, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited. I also think it was a really safe way to not necessarily have to include Tommy in this, which we talked about. We didn't think he would appear, but it was very safe in that it still gave him what he wanted and therefore, by his own rules, got him off the road. But it also progresses the story. We know Tommy's out there now. It explains why he couldn't find him. Every dot has a connection now.
Yeah.
My last thing, which I do want to explore briefly, is his identity crisis because I don't really feel like we had a full conclusion to that. Because let me say, when episode 5 happened, I had assumed he took on Billy Maximoff fully. We learn in the subsequent 2 episodes that is not true. Even up in episode 7, that's the question he asked Lilia when they were doing the reading. So now he's suited up as Wiccan, fully in the suit, fully using his powers. The mind, not control, but he can do that. The mind reading slash like conversation thing, the blue magic, the flying, he's doing it. He's doing all of it at his own will.
Took on death.
Yeah. He does. He's sitting there. He does it at the end when he closes the road. Like, my guy knows what he's doing. So should I now be assuming that's Billy Maximoff? Like, I'm a little unsure where he feels identity wise, or is he a mix? Like, I just don't think that came to a proper conclusion.
Yeah, I don't think they ever, like, explicitly said it, but I would say if I was a betting lady, that I would put my money on he's not fully embraced his identity as Billy, but he's much, much closer than he was at the beginning of this journey. I think that so many things really, if I'm gonna be honest, I think the catalyst, the true thing that tips him over the edge and is gonna be, along with something he has to work through, the thing that makes him Billy or truly embrace that identity is the fact that he created the whole road, right? That is not your, hey, I have a little magic. That is the son of the Scarlet Witch, right? Like,
Yeah.
that is literally taking a page out of your mom's playbook. So as much as he like may have some qualms around the mom issue and like that's a separate issue that he has to work through, I don't think he can any longer deny that he's Billy. I also think that in bringing Tommy back and giving him a body, it's also like, all right, now I brought my brother back. Like, this is very real now. There is another living soul who, while we don't know what Tommy's memory situation is, because he also spent much longer in whatever soul phase he was in. So unclear. We'll find that out, of course. We don't know what he's going to remember, but they lived that together. Whatever it is, however that is revealed later on, maybe it's some big, like, oh, they suddenly get all their memories back. Whatever that is, they are together now, and that is another person to corroborate that story, essentially. And in both cases, the original owners of the body are gone. So they never have those memories. It's just a matter of the boys, and in this case, Billy specifically, has to fully embrace himself. And I think he is. I was almost like this much closer, but then I realized nobody but Caitlin can see me. He is much, much closer than he was at the beginning of this because of everything that's happened. It's bringing him that much further, pun intended, down the road. And now he just has to like go those last few inches and be like, no, I am Billy Maximoff. I think suiting up is a huge step. He's almost there. I think he's almost there. I actually think finding Tommy is like probably the key, right? That's the moment where he's like, I'm it. I am Billy Maximoff and this is my brother.
That's what I was kind of thinking, but I will say that was one of the things I wish we had a little bit more on, just
Agreed.
because, again, episode 5, if you had kind of just been like, yep, Billy Maximoff, wouldn't have batted an eye. But you brought back this inner turmoil that he's having. And so I feel like if you're going to do that, finish it, which I don't really think happened there. Otherwise, he was capped off pretty well. We would be so remiss, but also would totally prove my point if we didn't start talking about Agatha right now, because this is actually the area where I'm most upset about the ending. And it's because, and I'll be the first to admit, I think since episode 3, go and look at one of the blog posts. I'm pretty sure one of the sections is called Teen All Along. Like, I will be the first to admit I was saying this. However, I was saying it on like a deeper, bigger level, not necessarily the fact that the show itself was going to become his, which it inherently did. I'm not mad about him, not mad about Joe Locke. I love him. I love his character. I'm excited for the future. But you called the show Agatha All Along. And was it Agatha All Along? Yes, it was. But she didn't get the ending I think she deserved. I think you did your best to absolutely ignore Rio and her relationship. You gave us like the weirdest little puzzle pieces, and it's still like we're missing 20 of them. We never really got the full backstory. Even with Nicholas, like, I think it's assumed that Rio is somehow the other mother. And that's like, he was made mystically, it sounded like, but also not. Like, I was so confused by that. You don't give us that. You don't really give us why Rio had to take him, though I really wanted to understand that. Like, was he supposed to be stillborn? What was the vibe there? What was going on, and why'd she have to take her son specifically? You don't really give a lot of just Agatha's how she gets where she gets beyond just like the story of the road. But you told us the story of the road also because Billy then makes the road happen and drove this whole show. So I think I just struggled with Agatha getting seemingly pushed a little bit to the side and not really being fleshed out completely, though I think she was deserving of that. I also, this goes back to the order of the episodes. I didn't like that the flashback was after 8 because 8 felt like it almost finished. You could have put Agatha's ghost showing up at the end of 8 and I kind of would have just gone with it. But because you were including the flashback, which I did like, I liked the flashback. It explained a deeper level to all this and explained how the road was never real. It felt really out of place because you have this happen in 8 and then you go into this flashback in 9. You're like, okay, but what is happening? Because I'm worried about what we just left in episode 8.
Yeah, I don't disagree with this. I did really like at 8 and 9, but I do think that this is a fair push on it because to have the main character's backstory not be fleshed out until 8 and or sorry, 9, and then even then I have other questions to your questions. I do think was a little odd. And it did strike me as odd at the time. I was just glowing because I was like, overall, this was great. But I do think if I'm going to look at it at a more analytical level, I think it is strange. And it does, if you're looking at it from like a narrative perspective, it totally makes sense. If you're going to call the show Agatha All Along to the final reveal being the song was Agatha All Along. Like that's so meta on so many different levels and
For
it's so
sure.
smart.
Yeah.
And I do get that. But you're right. It does not allow enough time for us to truly sit in what that flashback revealed. And I think that's part of it. I do want to address your question about why Nicholas. I was under the impression that he was supposed to die during childbirth. The way that Agatha looks at her and she says, "No, my love, don't do it. Like, not him, don't take him." And she says, "The best I can give you is time." I think we're meant to infer that he was either supposed to be stillborn or not survive very long past his birth. Whatever complications she was having while she was in labor, we're meant to think that Nicholas would not survive that, not Agatha. Not that Agatha was supposed to die, but that Nicholas was, and that Rio, I mean, I want to talk about Rio taking him because I think that we obviously knew, like Rio says, "You're my scar. I did something to hurt the person I love." But I don't think I ever really thought that like she would take Nicholas in his sleep and that she would take him when Agatha is not aware and not conscious and unable to say goodbye. Like it's one thing to be like, "Agatha, I have to do this," and to like have this conversation. Now is the time, and to give Agatha the opportunity, even though there's nothing that could give you true closure. I would think, I'm not speaking from experience, but I would think as a mother to lose your child, I can't imagine that that is no amount of saying goodbye is ever going to make that okay. But it's the way that she stole her son in the night when she was sleeping, for her to wake up to find her child dead next to her, that I was like, you just made a bad situation a 1,000 times worse. And I understand that you knew that Agatha would fight you tooth and nail if she was awake and aware of what was going to happen, but that was cowardly. This is a woman you proclaim to love, and yet you stole her child in the night because of your duty. And I get that you're torn, but like that part, I was like, I get why Agatha hates your guts, because if I'm Agatha, I would literally, if you weren't death, I would be trying to kill you.
I think that's so complicated too, like you were saying, because I think also she doesn't want him to suffer, and it's a lot easier for him to go in his sleep. I also think, I mean, it's so bittersweet, but she made sure he said goodbye. He went back and kissed his mother, and I think it's hard because, like I said, it's so complicated because you do see she's so hands are tied. Like, that is like the definition of Rio. That is her job. She is death. She has to take when she is given. I think the harder part is for Agatha, yes, he was taken in her sleep. She could not say goodbye, but I also think she was killing all those witches to try and keep Rio busy. And I think it's the feeling of, I should have just finished the job that day, because he knew. He called her mama. He said, "My mother wants me home." He was talking about Rio. She knew. And that's why she went running after him. But I think, I'm sure there's also inner guilt that it was like, if I would have just kept her busy, but it was the day I didn't. I had chosen not to because he had already, made me panic almost. And I didn't finish the job and she took him. So I think she probably has a lot of her own feelings as well that culminate into hating Rio more. It is such a complicated story, and I'm so glad we did see it. I think I also struggled a little bit though, because again, we didn't really see the depth of her and Rio's relationship.
Agreed. That needed to be fleshed out.
It 100% did. And I also, I think I was struggling because there was the Darkhold element too.
That was my big question. Why are we not seeing that piece of her history?
I'm very frustrated by that because I don't think I would have cared as much. No, I would have, because I've been saying this from the start. I wanted to see the Darkhold part of her history.
Yeah.
But I think I would have been relatively okay with letting it go and just seeing her do the coven thing and the Witch's Road thing over the years. Because if you notice, the way it's when it stops, like obviously up until it gets to our present day, there is a gap. It's like, I think like the 70s or 80s, you can like clearly see is the last one before, at least that they show us, before they show the present day one with Lilia and Jennifer and all them. That could be the Darkhold years for all we know. Again, wouldn't have loved it, but I could accept it. But you showed the Darkhold in her hallucination way back in episode 3. And granted, I think some of it was to get us talking because Jennifer had just sat there and been like, there's rumors she traded her son for the Darkhold and blah, 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 blah. Okay, but it's her hallucination. And when you look at everybody else's, they were accurate to what they lived through. That was inaccurate to what Agatha lived through. And I get their hallucinations, but they were meant to be a nightmare of a traumatic experience you've gone through or are living through in Alice's case because of the running from the curse and everything. So I'm confused. We didn't touch on that part of her history at all. I also am pretty sure, and I could be wrong, I feel like Rio makes some comment about it in the very first episode or second episode about the Darkhold and the power she got from it and everything. So why was that not given more time to shine? And this is kind of why I'm saying, like, I enjoyed seeing the rise of Wiccan. I love that we're going to have him moving forward. And I knew from the start, that's why I said the teen all along thing. He had a future for sure. I knew he was coming out of the show. Even though I couldn't have said the same about Agatha, even though we've now learned a form of her is coming out of this show, I think if you're going to name it after her, her character needs to be completely given its full story. I don't care if she's a villain that never turns good. They don't need to turn good. She had a reason for being a villain, and I liked it. I just don't understand why you wouldn't give us her entire story and background that makes her her, because it isn't just Nicholas. There's a whole darker whole chapter in her life.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that's very true. I should not have major questions about the main character's background coming out of her show.
We got a whole episode about Billy.
You're right. And I get that you're going to see Agatha again, but you're never going to get a piece of media that is this focused or should be this focused on her again. Does she reveal to Billy a little bit about her time, in the Darkhold, wherever their adventures take them next? I mean, I think one thing to think about is now they're both, because they're kind of a package deal, they're both somewhat confirmed for the Vision show if the rumors are to be believed. Does that mean I think they're going to be main characters in the Vision show? No. I think if you're running a 9 episode show, I think you see Tommy and Vision maybe coming together, White Vision, whatever you want to call him, however that's going to work. It's obviously going to be about those two. And then I would see Agatha and Billy rolling up with their magical sass in episode 7 or 8. And now we get the brothers reunited, and that's how that's going to roll. But they are a package deal now. I don't know that there is room narratively for Agatha, for us to see the true mentorship that's going to happen, because I want to talk about Agatha in the comics. And yes, she got the white hair. We love it. Great addition, great change. But whose mentor is she in the comics? Wanda's.
Mhm.
So she's not able to be Wanda's because they low key kind of are frenemies. That's fine. They're considered contemporaries in this particular show, the way that, or in WandaVision, the way that was set up. That's fine. I love that they made the pivot then for her to be Billy's mentor. Does she, in her mentorship, tell him a little bit about her time with the Darkhold and what that time in her life looked like and dark magic? I don't know. But where I'm trying to get to, and I've gone in 6 circles to try to get there, is I just don't know if those types of mentorship moments are going to make it off the cutting room floor and into an actual show, because it's not focused on either one of them. And those are the only other moments that I could truly see an organic fit for her time with the Darkhold. I do not want that to be a blank space anymore, and yet I think it's going to be, which is super, super annoying.
It's also not prevalent anymore. Wanda
Right, it's
destroyed every
gone.
Darkhold.
Yeah.
So it isn't important to any storyline we're going to see. At the end of the day, it is no longer important because it doesn't exist. Simple as that. There's no going back. When I say every Darkhold, guys, just a reminder, this is every universe's Darkhold. Gone. We're not going to find this in Secret Wars. None of it. It's not going to happen. I think I agree with your sentiment on everything you've said, and that's why I'm frustrated. It might seem stupid, but I think we deserve to understand this woman showed up in WandaVision under the influence of the Darkhold. She is the reason the Scarlet Witch exists.
Yeah.
If she didn't shut up to Wanda about you're a whole chapter, Wanda was sitting there going, "It's not me. It's not me." Like
I just want to be a mom. I just want to have my kids.
she was
I
like,
want to
"Let
live
me
in
do what I'm
peace."
doing. Let me go. I don't know who the Scarlet Witch is, but let her be. Let me be. We're not the same." Wanda did not want this fate. She wasn't trying to be this person. She wasn't trying to eventually be manipulated by the Darkhold. This was just not the direction she was going. But this was Agatha. She was being manipulated by the Darkhold. She already was clearly evil in her own way, taking the lives of witches for her own power. Fine. That's what she was doing. Cool. But then she met the Darkhold. How'd she get a hold of it? How long did she have it? These are all things that I think are still prevalent to her story. Did she ever try to use the Darkhold to get her son?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think in my head, because now we are stuck doing headcanons because they didn't actually answer the question. So to what you were saying earlier about, well, why is the Darkhold so intertwined with her son in that hallucination? The only thing to me that makes sense in my head is, well, she must have used the Darkhold to attempt to bring Nikki back, right? I mean, if you're thinking about what Wanda's done with it, with her dream walking and all of that, and even what Doctor Strange was able to do, where he like dream walked in his own dead body, like clearly they're only like 2 steps away from necromancy. So like, why couldn't she use it to try to bring her son back? Right? Like, it's not really that far fetched. That is what we have to assume, I guess, at this point, because they decided it wasn't that important to give us a firm answer.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. I think you can make the assumptions. I also think it's weird that it was in a bassinet now that I know that Nikki lived to be like 7.
Yeah, it just is a little disjointed.
A little. I'm not sure. It feels like Agatha's story was like, here are the points. We don't know how they connect, but here are the points. And that's a little bit how it felt.
It's almost like they had the intention of telling us her full story, and then they started editing and they were like, oh crap, we're not going to fit this in 9 episodes if we go through her whole thing. Like, she should have gotten a full episode herself like the rest of them did, right? Like, if you look at Agatha's trial, it was, I mean, don't get me wrong, traumatizing, like parental trauma, that is real. That is not something to be minimized. I don't don't mean to minimize that at all. It's an important piece of who Agatha is. It shaped her for better or worse to be the person that she is. I don't want to minimize that. But in comparison to some of the other things that we know also shaped her, her near loss of her child when she was giving birth, the way that she made a deal with death to give herself time to raise that child only to lose him while she was sleeping. Like, these are things that when you look at anybody bringing up Nikki, she is so clearly still affected by that. These are things that, I mean, if we're going with our Darkhold theory, brought her to the darkest, deepest depths of magic, dark magic that you could find. And yet, her whole trial was based on her mom, with Nikki making a cameo appearance, whereas others got to flesh out their binding. Lilia got to figure out her entire history. Alice broke a curse. These were truly very deep character fleshing moments, and Agatha got a fraction of that.
Agreed. I think actually the only person I could argue didn't get even a full moment might be Jennifer,
Fair.
which I bring her up specifically because she's the only one who lived and flew off in her own little, just like Wanda.
How about that little bomb that Agatha dropped? BT dubs, I'm the one who bound you.
To be honest, that was so funny because Agatha straight up was like, didn't know you were in town. Like, to be fair,
They were just
Agatha
paying me.
genuinely was like, didn't know I bound you, bro. My bad. Like, if I would have known, that probably would be a different story. No clue that was me. But yeah, Jennifer lived, the only one who did that besides. So actually, she still thinks the witch's robe was real. She flew off. She's gone.
True.
We don't know where she's going to be. I hope to see her in the future. But she's the only one who didn't get a full story. Other than the bomb being that Agatha bound her, we didn't get the full story about what she was going through with that man who tried to drown her in her hallucination. And we only got bits and pieces about what she was actually doing in her past. Obviously, we know she worked with babies, essentially like the pre-idea of like the NICU kind of idea is what I understood from it.
Like a midwife.
Yeah, yeah. We don't really know more about it beyond that, from my understanding. Okay, so she was quite surface level to me as well. I hope we explore more. But yes, we had Lilia's beautiful episode. Alice had her entire episode. Obviously, Jennifer still had her potions episode, but notice how every other trial, the person being tested is the main priority, versus in Jennifer's, everybody had an hallucination that affected them in different ways. I just think it's interesting that Agatha, as the leading character, didn't really get her own true trial either. I mean, there were people who left that episode and were like, did the trial finish? How were they successful? What was the test? Like, everybody was like, what just happened in this trial?
Totally agree. But while you were talking, I put two and two together, and maybe someone else has figured this out before. But do you remember how we were talking? We talked at length about what it was that Jennifer was doing that Agatha found was so important.
Oh.
She was saving children.
Yeah. As soon as you teed that up, I knew where you were going with it.
Yeah. When you were like, oh, blah, 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 her past, I was like, wait a minute. Didn't we have a question about that? It makes so much more sense now, knowing that Nikki died of some sort of, disease or something. Or if you're thinking more specifically as it relates to birthing and midwife and things like that, well, they would have never even been in that situation where Rio would have taken him at 6 because he would have survived the birth.
That does explain that. But again, I wish we would have found out more about her.
Oh, I totally agree. I love it when things like come together and you're like, puzzle, meet, mate, piece. That's so exciting.
Yeah, that is a really good point. I would not have really thought about that. But as soon as you teed it up, I was like, oh, yeah, I see exactly where you're going. I do think, I don't know, maybe the lack of story, at least for Jen, means we'll see her more. I mean, I think there's a reason she lived. But for Agatha, I agree with your earlier sentiment. I think this was the time. It was her show. I still enjoyed it. I would like to probably watch it again, to your point, to catch some of the things now that I know, but also to watch 8 and 9 and kind of see if maybe it changes my mind seeing it a second time to feel a little differently about it. But I'm glad she's not gone either, right? Like, I'm excited to see that Catherine Hahn will be coming back.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually curious, like, when we get to the Young Avengers stage, like, are we going to be the Young Avengers and Agatha because she's, like, over Billy's shoulder? Like, what is the vibe here? Because I'm not opposed to it. I actually think she would do really well in a room of teenagers. Like, her and Kate Bishop go, like, her and Kamala. Like, I feel like some of these conversations could be really interesting. I'm just like not sure how that, is all gonna work out.
So I do think, and nobody quote me on this, not a soul. I do feel like I read somewhere that while she is a ghost at one point in the comics, I'm pretty sure she becomes not a ghost later on. So maybe that's what happens. Or maybe I mean, like, let's be real. The reason she won't finish her journey is because she doesn't feel like she can face her son. So maybe getting Billy to his brother and maybe even them to the Young Avengers is like graduation for her. She's like, I finished raising these boys. I got them where they need to be. And now I can at least go back to my son and feel a little proud of the things I've done in my life since his passing and say, maybe I failed for the past 400 years to be a good person, but I took this boy under my wing and then I took his brother under my wing and I tried and I did it for you. And then maybe that's the moment she moves on. I don't see her unless there is a way for her to be unghosted in the shows or movies, and I don't know how that would work. I don't see her continuing. I don't see her past a certain amount of time mentoring Billy and then possibly at least being a supportive person for Tommy.
Yeah, I think they're gonna have to stop being a package deal at some point. I actually think, isn't she a member of the Midnight Suns? I feel like that. Don't quote me on that, but I feel like at one point she might be on that roster. Either way, those are the folks that she needs to be hanging out with. Those are also potentially the folks who can fix her situation. So I think if she's going to come back, I don't know that it's necessarily the Midnight Suns because I may have also just totally made up that she was on that roster and that might just be wishful thinking.
I don't remember her being on the roster. I know Strange is.
I know it's Strange, it's Blade, it's
I
Moon
think
Knight.
Wong,
Yeah.
but I don't remember Agatha.
Maybe it's Wanda and I'm mixing it up because I know there is a witch, is my point there. I feel like because we're going fantastical, magical, like I'm pretty sure there is a witch on the roster. And look, they don't have to even go against the comics and be like, we're gonna go, plot for plot. This is who it is, and go down the list. They could just add her because she's around and she fits in that realm.
True.
My point is, if she is going to make another appearance after she and Billy have outgrown their symbiotic relationship, that is where she could continue. And that is also how potentially she could get another shot at being like a real corporeal being that's not a ghost.
I also do wonder if we end up seeing her become Wanda's mentor. Obviously, they have a strange relationship at the end of WandaVision, but I think they both will have gone through quite interesting growth spurts in different directions. And when Wanda comes back, there's no guarantee she's going to be a good person still. Let's not forget that it's rumored she's going to be in a relationship with Doctor Doom during Secret Wars and Doomsday. So, that being said, not really on the right side of history there.
I'm not sure how that works out. He's supposed to be married to Sue Storm.
That's not the direction that it's been rumored that they're taking. And that's actually everybody's big point right now about her return, is because there's a strong chance that's going to happen. That is comic accurate at one point.
Yeah, but not the whole point is he steals Reed Richards' life. Now I'm steaming.
Yes. But remember, they even said in the Fantastic Four movie, they're greatly downplaying the relationship between Doom and Mr. Fantastic. Did you not see that?
No, I know. Ugh. Now I'm okay.
They said that they're going to be down.
'cause
Yeah, this can be a different thing, but they are saying that they're going to be downplaying their little beef that they have. So that being said, that's why I think a lot of people are saying, well, Wanda plays a big part in things as well, and with Doctor Doom. So that's kind of been the big point here. That being said, I could see a place where maybe Agatha tries to help her out or bring her back from the edge. Agatha's been an addict to the Darkhold. So is Wanda now. I think they have that in common. Plus, if Agatha is going to sit there and be the mentor to her child, I think there's a little bit of a soft spot that could exist from there as well. I don't know, but that would be comic accurate if they were to actually decide to go back to that. Either way, we'll just have to see, I think. Like, I don't know what's going to be her fate past the time of her and Billy together.
I'm truly just like I can't get over what you just told me, and I like can't. It's like taking Spider-Man And I just like it's like saying, you know what? I don't think that Norman Osborn and Peter Parker like have a fatherly relationship that deteriorates when they find out each other's secret identities. Like, let's just take something super intrinsic to the character and remove it.
That didn't happen in Tom Holland's.
I understand that it was also a different universe's thing. But like what I'm
Right, but
saying
I'm
is
just saying that's the same thing with Fantastic Four. They've done it.
it's not though. It's not the same. It's not the same. It's very different. I the reason I want to bring back
How
up
is
the
it
Fantastic Four,
different?
Caitlin, we will have like a whole other episode about this apparently. It is different. In my head, it is different. They are different
Okay,
things.
that's all I needed to hear was that it's in your head because I'm sitting there and I'm like, the parallels are exactly the
No,
same.
in my perspective, they are different things. I have a full reason behind it that I'm not going to waste time doing. The reason I bring up the Fantastic Four is because the one other place that it does make sense for her to come back is to go be Franklin Richards' au pair. And that is what she does in the comics. I think it's a really odd.
Agatha, by the way.
Yes, sorry. That is what Agatha does. She's like his nanny. I think it's a very odd pairing. It doesn't make sense to me, but it's comic accurate.
It's actually what initially really annoys her son, Nicholas, in the comics.
Yeah, it is actually. It really rubs him the wrong way. But eventually, the Fantastic Four are going to have to come to 616 because we've talked about this. We're not necessarily going to have the multiverse forever. And with that, they will then exist within the same universe as Agatha. It is still unclear at what phase we're meeting the Fantastic Four. We know it's an origin story, but are we far enough along in the story that we have a Franklin Richards? I'm not sure. Maybe in a few years we will, TBD. But I bring them up because that is the one other place that I am aware of that Agatha could fit based on the current cast of characters that we have or are slated to have in the MCU.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's possible. I don't really know where we're going at this point, other than the direct next stop is Tommy in Vision Quest.
Yes. And on that note, we'll probably think of a few other things we want to talk about Agatha. There will be some follow-up episodes. Katie will tell you what's immediately coming up for us, but this is our final raw reactions coverage to Agatha All Along. 10 out of 10, do recommend. We'll be rewatching. Big fans. If you are looking forward to our future coverage of things both Agatha and not Agatha related, please make sure that you're following on your podcast platform of choice, checking out the website for updates, and also, if you would be so inclined, the link to our Buy Me a Coffee is below, which gives you the opportunity to support the show however you might be interested.
You guys can also follow us on all of our socials, which are linked in the show notes below, including our YouTube, where we have our weekly Sister Scoop segments, which is all Marvel news, or not all, but 3 topics of Marvel news from that week that we cover. So go ahead and check that out as well. As Taylor mentioned, we are continuing Venom coverage because we had to take a small break to finish this, but we are going to go to Venom and then we'll come back to this afterwards, we promise. The next episode, we're going to be discussing the King in Black storyline, which is something we've actually been talking about rumor-wise for a couple weeks. So we're really excited. We're going to deep dive that storyline and how it could apply to Spider-Man 4 with everything we know about it and about Venom 3. So make sure you guys are checking that one out. We're very excited. It's going to be very knowledgeable. We will be coming with the research done, including myself.
I was going to say, both of us.
Both
There's
of
not
us
going to be one person
will be
carrying.
coming with the research done. That being said, make sure you guys are sticking around to listen to that episode when it comes out next week. And as always, Marvel just blew your mind, so let's talk about it.